Wow, a digital day. That's a very exceptional way to keep in touch with digital innovation and the ecosystem. I'd like to call on stage right now the developer program manager of Occipital, and to discover together with him spatial computing for AR and VR. Let's welcome Mark Piszczor. Thank you.
Welcome, and thanks for attending my presentation. I think this is great. Everything and everyone here and all the conversations I've had, I think are amazing, and I think you all are doing the right thing for being here and learning about these industries and the new technologies being presented. My name is Mark. I work for a company called Occipital. We create our own spatial computing software and hardware. I'll be explaining some of the technologies using Occipital's own proprietary software, but I'll also be talking a little more broadly also about augmented reality and virtual reality, because I want to give you the understanding that you should understand the technology before you actually approach and solve the problem. And more importantly, I think it's important that you understand the problem you're trying to solve and understand it adequately. Okay? So a little bit about me. I used to be on the Google Project Tango team. Before that, I worked on mobile platforms, including the Windows Phone 7. I'm involved in Augmented World Expo and SIGGRAPH as well. And this gentleman here on the left is famed game designer Jesse Schell. I studied under him at Carnegie Mellon University. While there, I also developed a medieval combat video game with a team of students there. And what we're trying to do is create a video game that gave people the visceral feeling of being on the medieval combat battlefield. And of course, we can make a video game that kind of gives that feeling and looks like it. But I took it a step further and took the summer off and decided to train with medieval combat reenactors. And here's what that looks like. Here's what it looks like to be in that physical space of medieval combat. This is all full contact, full gear, and I mention this because I'm serious about how we cross and merge the physical and the digital spaces. And you can't get more real than this. Here we go. So, like I said, Occipital, this is a slide from our presentation, and it kind of demonstrates what our technology can do. We can map an indoor space, be it the walls, also objects in your room, and create a digital file that you can use later. This is also good for 6 degrees of freedom tracking, and put it all together and you get some solid mixed reality. There's a few use cases that I'll be demonstrating and talking about throughout the presentation. The first one is with General Motors and their digital agency Isobar. I'll talk about the problems and the constraints they were dealing with, but first I'll play this video. So General Motors went to their digital agency, and they knew they wanted to sell cars, but they wanted to use new technology. Now, I think this is amazing. Everything that you saw on that video regarding our technology using our mixed reality bridge engine, I think it's mind-blowing. But I'm a nerd, so I'm curious about how this all works. This person who wants to buy a car, admittedly, let's be honest, she's probably not interested in the technology. And when technology is doing its job, it does its job, and then it gets out of the way and lets the user experience it and really get the information they need to make the decisions they need to make. So I'll talk briefly about how this all works, including with our structure sensor. This is a depth sensor that reconstructs your environment. It takes that information, combines it with an IMU here on the left side of the screen. All modern phones, all modern smartphones have an IMU, an accelerometer or gyroscope. It's the second piece of information. Third piece of information, it takes the camera data from your mobile phone. And here we see these dots on the screen. What it's doing is it's finding these unique feature points and trying to track those feature points per frame as your device moves around. It's three key pieces of information, putting it together, and this map is being built. Now, the software takes this map, and here you can see a point cloud is being assembled of the environment, of the geometry, and here you see frustrums demonstrating how the phone is moving around your environment. And now that you have this environmental awareness, this rich awareness, you can also remove it, or remove everything outside of that. Now, in this case, you can basically reskin any car to look like a Chevrolet Cruze. There's a fun fact about this. That radio in the application actually works when you're in the application on the iPad. Now, this gives the ability for someone to be almost anywhere on any car and recreate that Chevy Cruze experience. Place it anywhere, put it into a virtual environment and see how it performs. And now you can actually talk about your next purchase instead of looking at, let's say, brochures or pamphlets. This is a new way to experience the products that you will be buying, all created digitally. And GM especially took their constraints. They have a dense city. They have small spaces, so they can't carry inventory of every red, yellow, and blue car. And they no longer have to use brochures to help sell that car. Additionally, they have these technological features in this expensive automobile, let's say, that they want to help promote and sell. So I think GM did a great job using mixed reality, and it's helping people make decisions. Now, the second use case, I'm going to segue off of technological features to talk about the defense industry. There's a lot of technology going on here. Now, in some of the conversations that I have with people from the defense industry, I often have to stop myself and think, why is the defense industry talking to me about augmented reality and mixed reality when it's fair to say that they essentially invented the technology? There's a lot of augmented reality and virtual reality technology that came out of the research in military. And here's how it was explained to me. They want to train their less experienced employees to be as effective as the more senior level technicians without loss of quality. Right, because the fact is, not every government or organization that's buying equipment from defense contractors can afford the latest models. So they want to maintain what they currently have, and they have the right to do so. So then I ask, okay, well, if you're buying something expensive, aren't you given the CAD models so that you can use later? And the thing is, they don't. They bought this equipment at a time where CAD models, computer-aided design models, did not exist. So they have to recreate that. So now you can reconstruct the equipment you've bought, bring it into a system, and create a training system for your employees who aren't familiar with this. And then we get into a conversation about potato chips. And this turned into an analogy of trying to explain what the difference is of the final product in the real world, which has curves. Curves exist in the real world, and it's difficult to explain that from 2D blueprints and even on a 2D screen. So mixed reality, augmented reality is helping make those decisions that help move the business forward and help your employees and your organization be more efficient and more productive. How many times do you have to look at the same thing in 2 dimensions to understand what it actually is in 3 dimensions? And now you can have a conversation around it. And so these are 2 people who are actually moving around their table, interacting with a 3D model, and essentially interacting with the product they will buy before they buy it. Final quote from the defense industry: democratizing legacy systems. And that's pretty much what it comes down to. These people have bought this equipment, and they deserve the right to maintain it. This is a segue into my next slide, which is the democracy that's been announced this year just by Apple and Google. Apple announced their AR kit, Google announced their AR core. Now, these are 2 behemoths essentially putting out their solutions into the real world. And you could see this battle going on because they are the 2 most popular mobile systems out there, and now that they're including augmented reality into their framework, and that's a powerful statement. Just a little background, AR Core came out of Project Tango, which had additional sensors, including this fisheye lens and a depth sensor. AR Core does not need that. And Project Tango applications are now being ported over to AR Core, and I think AR Core has a little more catching up to do with the capabilities of the devices that run Android, but we'll get there, I think. And here's just a quick example of how AR Kit is being used on Apple. Very simple, very basic. Will this fit there? That's something that we can understand more in 3D space, in our space. More so than you can do with a measuring tape and a 2D blueprint. The story of AR and VR, I think, is also interesting. I've always been a proponent of AR before VR. This is a graph I ran in Google Trends a little over a year ago, and you could see AR had a little more popularity, and then by the end of 2015, virtual reality just hockey sticked up, and all the popularity for virtual reality was just exploded. And part of that, of course, was here in 2014 when Facebook put their money into the virtual reality scene and bought Oculus. Of course, HTC Vive was also introduced. So that was then. Here's the story now. The future of, well, let's say the popularity of VR currently has kind of come down, perhaps dramatically. We take a closer look in the last 6 months, and you can see how they're kind of merging. And I'd say this may be a sign that AR, VR, and now mixed reality too is being used as a term, and there may be some convergence coming along where it's one device that will do both VR and AR. When you're investigating all these technologies, you'll learn about tracking, localization, and 3D mapping. I would do you a disservice if I went into those all in this presentation, and instead I'm going to recommend that you read my friend Matt's blog on all of those. Look him up on medium.com. You'll find his posts, and he's updated them since. And also, while you're at it, look up Ori Inbar's post on the AR Cloud, too. There's some compelling information there, and it's a great starting point if you're just getting into the information that is capable with this tech. So AR Kit. Why was AR Kit and AR Core such a big deal? But essentially, overnight, you have 380 million devices now enabled. You need an iPhone 6s at a minimum, but it's compelling enough where you get really, really good augmented reality on your mobile phone. Right? It's not the only solution. There are others, but this is a game changer for the augmented reality industry. Now, to further that point, the most compelling VR experience, arguably is on the HTC Vive. And here are some mapped areas of your range on these different virtual reality systems. It's still somewhat limited, right? You can get a large enough space using the HTC Vive in your living room. But this will eventually move to a headset. And there's a lot of talk. Even just yesterday, there was a report on Bloomberg that the iPhone may be replaced with a headset, and that was announced or maybe perhaps leaked, but that was just reported yesterday by Bloomberg. And for augmented reality to work on either standalone headsets or even a form factor as a standard eyeglasses, some more work needs to happen. We need to be able to process all this information. We need to be considerate of power consumption and heat. But in order to get there and make that effective, I think everyone here can help with helping the industry and all the markets understand how effective this is as a tool. So, skipping up ahead, another announcement from Apple with their iPhone X was their front face ID. So now Apple does a really good job at personalizing the iOS experience, right? Even when you unbox your iPhone or your Macintosh laptop, it feels so personal. It feels so special. And now they've even gone even further, and now they use your face to unlock your phone. Now your phone knows your face, and you can't even trick the system. People have tried. So I think this is telling that spatial computing is going very personal. On the other hand, there's plenty to see on the other side of the phone too. And spatial computing is also going very large scale. And I'll get into both of those. Relevant to the fashion industry here in Milan, virtual fitting rooms. I think this solution is by Toshiba. And here you see simply a jacket overlaid on top of this woman standing in front of it. The future of spatial computing will allow much more personal experiences than this, right? There are systems out there that will measure every single dimension about you. I mean, for example, myself, I have disproportionate length of arms. My arms are a little longer for the standard person my height. So for me to be able to get the exact measurements computed and then be able to stand in front of this system and have an article of clothing that actually fits me mapped on top of myself, that is a much more compelling experience. And then there's something much more to be learned about this, especially with Amazon's recent acquisition of Body Labs. Body Labs did some amazing work with analysis of the human form, and I think we'll see more of this. Personally, I think this is a play to get to that one-click buy now faster, because if my computer or if Amazon knows my dimensions, it can do better recommendations for the clothing I'm trying to buy. On the larger scale, on the other side of the phone, large-scale mapping. There's some heavy interest in mapping large spaces for several reasons. One, you can map either rooms, individual rooms, or you can map areas as large as the warehouses, or even areas as large as walking down the street and mapping the surfaces of every building that you see. This gives you that information, allows you to put it into a simulator, for example, and understanding how your building will react to the environment. A lot of construction companies are interested in this too, because they can get daily updates to their construction sites. The cost of avoiding a rework after your foundation and your building is built, and then you suddenly learn based on the plans you need to move a pipe, that is much more expensive than sometimes in the actual building itself, especially when you get to legal and insurance situations. But you don't necessarily need extra hardware. Here's an example of crowdsourced photos. This is of the San Marcos Cathedral in Venice. All these photos existed out in the cloud. There's software and solutions out there that can take all the photos, take all of the metadata, apply some artificial intelligence as well, and now you get a pretty good representation of what that cathedral is. Also, furthering the theme of this larger scale, governments, cities, municipalities, they have assets underneath the ground that we're not even aware of, right? From simply gas lines, water lines, electrical, and sewage. They want to be able to locate these assets of theirs, because they want to be accurate when they actually have to go dig something up. In the United States alone, I think in the gas industry, the cost of digging into the ground and learning that you dug in one place erroneously, the minimum cost for that is $10,000 in the gas industry alone. Here's a new technology coming out that we at Occipital are working on, where we are trying to bring spatial computing to all mobile devices with a single camera. So you won't need the extra sensor. And right now we're building this to work on the latest Snapdragon. We're getting there. We're getting there. Here you can already see those feature points that I mentioned earlier. Those are already being detected in the environment. It's being built up, and this will enable mobile 6 degrees of freedom positional tracking. I would fast forward it, but so this is some future technology we're working on. I'm bringing it back to this video because I think, again, thank you all for being here. All the work and all the curiosity you're putting into this, will eventually help us get to experiencing medieval combat in a more visceral feeling, where I feel like I'm actually in it rather than playing the video game on a 2D screen. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Sure.
Which skills should people focus on in order to grasp spatial computing challenges?
I think, oddly enough, I think interpersonal skills are a big benefit, but also curiosity. Right? The reason we're all here, we want to learn more about the technology.
Sure.
All these demos out there, try them all, ask questions. If you don't get the answer you're looking for, ask again. I mean, the communities around augmented reality, virtual reality, AI, Internet of Things, they're forming fast, and there are answers out there, and if they're not, but we're all here to collaborate and try to solve those.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks.